In this video, I'm going to be talking about the characteristics of life that all living things have. You are to take notes on this on loose leaf paper accurately, carefully, and completely. We'll be using this information in the lab that we're going to do next class. So the better you do on this, the more easily it is to do well on the lab. All living things have these 7 characteristics or properties of life. First, are composed of one or more cells. They have systems of related parts. 3, structure and function are related. 4, they all must need to maintain homeostasis. 5, all living things need energy. 6, all living things must reproduce and develop. And 7, all living things evolved. Living things are composed of one or more cells. Okay, the cell is the basic unit of life. The basic unit of structure and function in living things is a cell. Single-celled organisms or unicellular organisms are composed of only one cell. These are the most numerous forms of life on Earth. Bacteria are found in literally every biome on Earth. They can live in colonies, but each unicellular organism has to carry out all the characteristics of life or the properties of life by themselves. They don't get help. Whereas multicellular organisms, different cells have different functions to help the entire organism survive. You can see from the picture here, we have both unicellular organisms. It says organisms that have only one cell. Amoeba, bacteria, paramecium, these are all unicellular organisms. Multicellular organisms are composed of organisms containing many cells. Okay, and this would be like plants and animals, fungi. These things would all have multi or many cells, and the cells within them would have specialized functions to help the organism survive. Living things have systems of related parts. A system is an organized group of related parts that interact to form a whole. So within the cell has specialized structures called organelles that are going to have a specific function to help that cell survive. An organelle called the mitochondria would help transform energy into a usable form, taking sugars and breaking down into ATP. Other organelles called the endoplasmic reticulum would make proteins that would be necessary for the cell either to be used within or outside of the cell. The nucleus, a specialized area organelle cell, is a control center, and so on. So it has these specialized areas that do very specific functions to help the cell survive. In a multicellular organism, the cells can work together to form tissues. Now, tissues would be a group of cells, all of the same type, that have a specific function. The tissues will come together to form organs. The organs work together to form organ systems, and organ systems work together to form organisms. Groups of organisms living in a specific area would make up an ecosystem. So all these things would have systems of related parts from one individual cell all the way up to an ecosystem. They have these interrelated, interacting parts that help the whole system work. Structure and function are related. What something does is directly related to its shape or form. So you have pictures of some different structures in organisms. The teeth in a human, we're going to have different types of teeth in the front. These incisors up here, these are for cutting, okay, and tearing away at food. They're going to have a different shape. They're going to be sharper and narrower, maybe longer to cut through things. The molars back here are going to be wider and flatter for grinding down stuff into making it smaller, getting it prepared to swallow. Okay, so its shape of the teeth in the front and the shape of the teeth in the back are different because they have different functions. Same thing with these carrier proteins. This is a cross section of a cell membrane. This part is the cell membrane here, and as you can see, this carrier protein is going to have this molecule fit into here and allow it to transport itself inside the cell. So notice that only these circular shapes are going to fit in the middle part of this carrier protein. If it was a different shape, it wouldn't fit, and it wouldn't do that. If it was a different molecule, it would have a different carrier protein specific to its shape that would allow it to pass through. Same thing with enzymes. Okay, these are enzymes. Okay, specifically an enzyme substrate complex. And if you notice that this area here called the active site, this is the area on the enzyme that is going to hold the substrate. These shapes here are complementary to one another. This one fits inside of there, and this fits inside of there, and this fits inside of there, and it holds it long enough so that enzyme can do its job, which is to help catalyze chemical reactions and make reactions go at normal body temperatures. Okay, lastly, we have groups of different cells. Our different cells pictured here. A red blood cell kind of looks like circular, but yet flat. Okay, and its shape is such that it can hold oxygen to carry oxygenated blood throughout an organism. Okay, muscle cells, from their structure here, these things are going to have fibers in them. You can see the striations or the fibers in this muscle cell. They're going to shorten when a cell contracts, and they're going to lengthen when a cell relaxes, a muscle cell relaxes. Nerve cells are branched, right? Because nerve cells are going to carry nervous impulses to different parts of the organism, and they're branched because they work much like an extension cord, where all it needs to do is send this electrical signal from the body of the nerve cell down to where it's going to innervate whatever muscle cell or fiber that it's going to innervate. So its structure determines what it's able to do. Living things must maintain homeostasis. Okay, every living thing, all organisms, are going to respond to the environment, and by responding to the environment, they're going to have to maintain their constant or steady internal conditions. This is known as homeostasis. Cells function best within a very limited range of conditions: temperature, pH, salinity, hydration, and so on. They have to have this certain range of conditions, or that life can break down, and that could be problematic. Okay, this process of homeostasis is maintained through negative feedback, a change in a system which causes a response which returns the system back to its original state. Okay, homeostasis can be maintained by behavior. A reptile warming itself on a rock, it's getting its body temp up by getting out in the sun, getting on this warm rock to elevate its internal body temperature, because it can't regulate that on its own. Okay, unlike mammals, humans can regulate our internal body temperature, because the energy given off by cellular reactions will get trapped in our bodies, and that's what allows us to maintain a steady internal environment of about 98.6 degrees. Okay, other organisms do not have that ability. Just like with hydration, you need
living things need energy. All living things, all organisms need sources of energy for life processes to be able to be carried out. Inability to cause change or do work is what energy is needed for. This is important for metabolism. Metabolism is all the chemical processes that build up or break down materials in a living thing. All life uses chemical energy. Some organisms can make their own food. These would be called producers, like plants can make their own food through the process of photosynthesis. Some organisms eat other organisms to get their food. Okay, like this picture of this lion taking down a zebra. It has to eat that organism in order to eat food. It can't just like lean on the sun and get energy that way. It actually has to like capture and consume its prey in order to get its energy. Every living thing needs energy to carry out its life processes. Without energy, that organism will die.
Organisms need to have the ability to reproduce and develop. Not every individual in a species needs to be able to reproduce. However, the species itself must produce enough viable offspring that can develop and mature and have the ability to reproduce to keep the species alive and thriving. If they can't, these species would eventually go extinct and we would lose that from the face of the earth forever. Reproduction can either be one parent, which is called asexual reproduction, like in this bacteria here. What it does is it just replicates its DNA. It splits in half, okay, replicating its DNA. It splits in half and it forms two identical daughter cells. Identical meaning they're genetically identical because they have the exact same DNA from when DNA replicated early in this process. The other way to do this is sexual reproduction, which is where two parents would be involved. One parent, the male, would pass on the sperm. The other parent, the female, would pass on the egg cell. These things would fuse together during conception or fertilization, and this organism, this newly formed zygote or fertilized egg, would develop into a young offspring, which would mature and get up to the ability as an adult or young adult to reproduce and again keep the species viable. The last thing is organisms need to have the ability to evolve. Okay, evolution is a change in living things over time, or a change in genetic makeup of a species over time. Evolution is a long, very slow process. It can occur through a process called natural selection, which we're going to get to in a later chapter, where this inherited trait, for whatever reason, gives an individual a better ability to survive and reproduce more successfully than other organisms of the same species that don't have that particular trait. This is called adaptation, or more specifically, adaptation to environment. And again, this trait gives it an advantage over members of the same species that don't have this trait, and as a result, it's more successful in reproduction and survival, and it passes those traits on to its offspring over time, setting off this process called evolution, where it is evolving into a new species.